Hello, my name is James McLachlan, editor of Car Design News, and welcome to this CDN livestream, How Will CMF Shape an Electric Future? Now, automotive design is undergoing universal change with new ways to reshape the exterior and interior of cars. New platforms and technology will need a new aesthetic that will harness materials and texture to attract the next generation of customers. And having returned from Milan Design Week myself, it's all the talk seemed to revolve around materials. It was also clear that there were following trends in interior design and hospitality. There's going to be a new emphasis on tactility and haptics. And this feeds into a growing interest in wider issues such as well-being and sustainability. There's going to be an increased focus on how materials enhance performance, lightweighting and durability of the car. And as EVs have become dominant, at least in the medium term, CMF teams are in a unique position to help shape this future. And to help discuss what that future might look like, I'm delighted to be joined by our esteemed panel, who are Nicola Danks, Colour and Materials Design Manager at Lucid, Jennifer Hendren, Senior Director of Product Development at Ultrafabrics, and Marie-Camille Lecoq, Head of CMF and Sustainability at Lotus. And if you guys could just turn your cameras on, we will get the discussion going. Hi, Nicola. Hi, Marie.
Morning. Hi.
Welcome.
Hi.
Very, very nice to have you with us. I'm going to start with a general question for all of you, actually, and this is how the perception of EVs is changing, where it is and and how it's changing. Obviously, they're perceived to be the future at the moment, but certainly in the sort of the short to medium term. But I was wondering how that was informing what customers want and how CMF can reflect those wants and needs. Nicola, I might start with you, if that's all right, to put you on the spot.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But it's really interesting actually to see the journey of EVs over the past 5-10 years. And I think initially the uptake of those EVs was quite slim. And I think it might have been either a mindset shift that needed to happen, or maybe the industry actually just had to figure out kind of how to appeal to the customer so they didn't feel like that was a less of an option or a different option. And now I think you can see in the market there is a wide selection that is continuously growing from automotive designers, companies, etc. And we've now become really successful. And I think, as myself, being at Lucid, which is a relatively new startup, those startups are being really taken seriously. And the growth, as I said, of EVs is exponential, and it's only going to continue to grow. And that's where CMF is really important. We are the key stakeholders in making sure that we have consistency from one car to the next, and also making sure that the customers feel like they don't lose anything from perhaps swapping from an ICE engine to an EV.
Yeah, I've to sort of describe what I view CMF as the kind of glue that holds various different things together within, not literally, of course, well, in some cases perhaps, but this idea of it being a lesser option, it's just a point that it kind of made me laugh. There was an episode of The Simpsons once where the oil industry had sponsored an advert for the electric car, and they called it the Electorus and made it absolutely rubbish because it was just seen as this kind of lesser option. The perception has changed of it. It is companies like Lucid that have managed to do that. Obviously, Tesla were the ones who really got ahead of the game, but Lucid are taken very, very seriously in this domain. And actually, Marie-Camille, you're at Lotus, and this is historically it's all about petrol engines and high revs and thrill seeking. But this is a start of a journey for you as well, that as Lotus moves from being that kind of sports car brand to something a bit more lifestyle.
Yeah, and I think like Nicola explained, I think it's a journey for most of the brand, is trying to find what is their answer regarding EVs. I don't think there is one answer. And for Lotus, I think there was understanding how we can shift without losing the heritage of Lotus and becoming more lifestyle, and that's what we are trying. And I think with the Electra, I think that's quite successful, and it kind of show the right direction we want to do for Lotus, and then next future products will show even more. But yeah, I think I believe there is no one answer for that. there is different customers, different profile, and I think everyone has a space to express their identity, I guess.
Yes, not one answer. It's a shame there isn't one answer. I was hoping you'd just say.
I wish it would be easier, I mean, our life much easier.
And Jennifer, coming from slightly outside, but maybe a bigger picture, how have you sort of observed this kind of in your own experience, this move away from ICE engines in EV in terms of a kind of a CMF materials angle?
Well, I think one thing that's really interesting to me is the comment MC made about that there isn't just one answer, and from a materiality standpoint, we realize that. So polyurethanes, we are a performance technical product, and because of that, we have the ability to really fit into any interior aesthetic that is needed, as well as any interior specs. So that has been sort of our approach to this. Is it's not one size fits all. It's really, we have to be able to sort of analyze across a lot of different markets, you know, obviously automotive being, you know, one of the largest. What do we build into our products? Because our products are actually something we build, you know, it's like a layered process. How do we layer in the needs and the performance attributes as well as the haptics? Polyurethanes are that kind of product, so we can give a much more diverse range of products to meet the needs.
Diversity, that is an interesting question, Nicola. The idea that there could be, you know, perhaps if we move away from sort of certain well-established materials, it could be seen as slightly restrictive. How important is this diversity of approaches to your work at Lucid and actually in the wider sort of automotive world?
I think as a CMF designer, you have to understand the breadth of what materials you can work with and understand the chemistry, the technology, and everything that really goes into every single material, be that a PU, be it a paint, be it plastic, anything. And the diversity is important as you build, similar to how MC was saying about building the future of the cars that are going to be coming. As you build a family of vehicles and as you build a strategy, the diversity of the materials is just as important as really the similarities, because you have to build a strategy that is sustainable. You have to build a strategy where there is a common thread from one family of vehicles to the next. So you use differentiation between materials to highlight probably a difference in trim level or a difference of price aspect from one vehicle to the next. But you also have to look at the similarities to make sure that there's consistency within the stories that you're trying to tell within the vehicle.
Marie, I might actually adopt MC Marie-Camille because it will save me butchering your name of my awful friend. But this is an interesting topic, isn't it? How you differentiate and how you kind of create within your own sort of ecosystem different approaches, different levels. When you look at when you looked at something like the Electra, this is a sea change for an OEM like Lotus, moving into this, not only into electrification but also into the SUV territory. Now, how did you try and define that aesthetic through sort of CMF?
I think it depends, of course, depending on each brand. But for Lotus, the way we started is look at what we've done. I think that's what's important. You need to understand what is the brand, and from that, you need to understand how far you can push it without using the essence of the brand. And it was a big job at the beginning, and we explored different avenues. Few avenues were more traditional, some avenues were more forward thinking, and I guess you have to find the right balance in understanding what suits at that time the brand. And I think it's also step by step. I think you can't do everything in once, so you need to figure out what at this stage makes sense for the brand to achieve. And I think for us, it was important that the new generation of products show that it's modern, relevant, and high quality. So for us, that was the main focus, and we want to also make sure we are, you know, in line with what everyone is doing about sustainability, but now being, you know, all about this, because of course that's something we couldn't achieve right away. And also, I think this is not the essence of Lotus just about sustainability. We believe that is a commitment from the team and the company, but it's not really a responsibility we want to put on to the customer.
Right.
But we just look at really nice materials that make sense for the brands. That's what we kind of try to achieve.
And there's a lot to unpack there, I think. Do you see some of your role as leading the customer towards a more sustainable thing, not by subterfuge, but actually just making it, starting from a base point that is a much more kind of environmentally friendly proposition?
Personally, I think we have to move away so to have the obvious look of sustainability. I think it can't really work. It depends for some brand, of course, but for me, it's more about bringing some user experience to the customer so they can feel connected to the brand, instead of throwing in their face, look, this is sustainable, where I feel like it's a bit too, I think people want to feel guilt-free. So I think we should not put the pressure on the customer. It's just more showing that we are offering something that will bring them a new experience and they will benefit from it. And it will come from an honest place from the brand. So I think that's where we should approach the development from a CMF point of view, I guess.
Yeah, it is interesting. You don't want to club people over the head with a sustainability message. It doesn't necessarily chime so much with a sports car brand at the best of times. You write about thrills and excitement and lifestyle. Quality is an interesting question as well. I think, Jennifer, I could come to you on the issue of quality, because often I didn't mean us to jump into sustainability so early in the conversation, but since we're here, what is there's historically been a perception that perhaps sustainability means not quite as good as sort of less environmentally friendly materials. I mean, what is your take on that whole sort of push and pull between synthetic and authentic materials? I can use authentic in inverted commas if you like, but
I think it's all about education, and it's having the conversation, and it's about authenticity. You know, authenticity can be about how our product is made and how our product contains recycled backcloth or bio content, and that within that we are speaking very directly to the fact that we're not losing the haptics, we're not losing the performance, but we're intentionally, advocating for products that, do have more of a sustainability content, and that is, for us at least, part of the DNA of the company. We stand really proudly about that, and I think there are customers who understand that, because across all markets, the term sustainability and what people are looking for, to MC's point, people want to feel good about what they purchase. They don't want to be guilt-ridden, and I think what we have to start to do is just explain and give the provenance of where some of these products are coming from, how they're being made, what is the processing, and let them make that determination for themselves, right? Don't, as long as we're being true to who we are as a company and what we choose to put out there in terms of sustainability and our products, and tell that story, it is then up to the customer if that needs to be part of their brand, part of their story. To MC's point, there are certain OEMs who, are taking a different tact with sustainability. As I said, with polyurethanes, there's so many different ways that we can impact our product in a sustainable way, and we're proceeding with that. It's then just up to the customer.
And just on a kind of moving slightly away from that idea, or actually maybe staying with it with a kind of with half an eye or full eye on what we're learning from other industries, because just to sort of not to dive into this idea of cross collaboration between industries. I've just come back from Land Design Week. A lot of the talk around that was about materials and sustainability, but also there are learnings, I think, or maybe you can tell me if there are sort of influences coming in from ideas of hospitality and interior design that are shifting into automotive design and almost sort of informing a kind of a new aesthetic centered around well-being, which is not often something we associate with a car journey, for example. Nicola, it'd be great if you could sort of unpack some of that for us.
Yeah, I think there was almost a trend of what we'd call maybe smart materials at one point, and things that were embedded with technology. But as a designer, you have to assess really what is that value that is added not only to the vehicle, but also to the customer. And when you involve well-being, there's different ways to assess how to adapt materials, and looking at other industries is really important. So you can look at the hospitality industry to understand how they create spaces within the hotel lobby or within the bedrooms to make a person feel a certain way. What colors do they use? What tones do they use? What textures do they use? But then you can also look further afield. You can look to the medical industry. You can look to the aerospace industry. And it's really understanding, like Jennifer said, how the processes of materials are made, and understanding how you can learn about materials and learn about processes to adapt them to be suitable for automotive. And that's the sort of smart materials that we want to engage to offer this well-being to a customer. And within Lucid, we try to really cleverly place materials in certain places for certain experiences. And we have 3 pillars, really. We have energy, space, and time. And within the interior, to create a feeling of well-being, we use materials, and we also use color in a very unique way to create that space, to create this zone of comfort, and really encapsulate the driver and the passengers as well, so that they feel like they're in a really calming situation, calming environment. And that's how we try to adapt to the requirements of well-being.
Colour's an interesting one, because I think there's been, taking its lead from the furniture industry and some of the kind of the Scandinavian aesthetic, it's been very, very prevalent in terms of muted tones, muted colours. We've seen that emanating from various OEMs, and I wondered whether, we ran a column quite recently about, it was just literally bring back color to interiors, and I wonder if there is going to be a moment where we do need broader palettes, we do need kind of more exciting interiors, and that can be a bit more stimulating rather than this kind of, I wouldn't say minimalist almost palette that we've seen. Nicola, I'll start with you, but then I can move on. I think we can move on to everyone can chip in on that one.
So colour for Lucid is incredibly important, mostly because it was designed around California and locations within California. But not only the locations, a certain time of day as well. So going back to space, energy, and time. And the use of colour in the interiors, we have this unique front to rear split. And again, that creates the space in the interior. It creates certain feelings depending on where you sit. And our palette is inspired by nature. So there are vibrant colours in nature. There are muted colours in nature. And what we really pull on is just natural experiences, natural colours, but also link it to a heritage design movement that happened in California, the mid-century modern design. And so that's where there's certain colours and certain things there that you don't want to disassociate from. And that inspiration really drives every story, every colour theme that we introduce into Lucid.
MC, your turn to weigh in on the C word debate, the colour debate.
I think, as a color and materials designer, we love colors and we are sensitive with it, but I think we are slightly moving away. I'm not saying it's important, it's really important to take care of colors, but I think this is not the first thing now we are trying to push. We are looking at the materials itself. And I think if the materials is the way it is, we don't want to add chemical to modify it. So yeah. I think the materials itself drive the direction, but of course we're not forgetting the colors, because they set the mood and the brand. For Lotus, yellow is extremely important, so it's something we don't want to lose. But it can be expressed by a different way. It can't only be a full yellow interior car. It wouldn't be too much. And if we are putting our more like business hat, at the end of the day, what people buy is neutral color because they feel it's quite safe. So if we are moving to the direction of sustainability, we have to consider this and not produce more waste, and we have to be sensitive with that. And it's good to have a signature color, but we should have reasonable in the complexity of it and still, you know, understand and hear the customer, because at the end of the day, if they are buying more black or Leica, that's the reality. So we have to adapt to that too. So that's the way I see it. Colors will be always something I love, but materials are really now driving the direction, to be honest, for me. You know, we know we can't modify it, so we have to adapt around it.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you are Lotus, your brand color is bright yellow, and yeah, how you sort of feed that in, it's a challenge. I don't know if we're going to see Lotus move in a sort of Polestar-ish direction in the future. I somehow doubt it. But Jennifer, weigh in on the color for me. I mean, what's your take?
Well, as you can see with my background,
yes,
we're very much about color, because obviously, you know, we service so many different markets, and because of that, we're actually known as a color destination. So obviously, for different markets, there's a different approach. To MC's point, obviously, a lot of what we sell are, you know, light colors into grays, into blacks, that, you know, for automotive. But what we do also see is a real interest, to her point, in if you start talking about sustainability, you know, our ideation and R&D department really starts to talk about what would natural pigments look like, natural dyes. And then, you know, in starting to work on that and work with that, there's an interesting sort of takeoff where those dyes, basically because they're natural, there isn't the same longevity and there isn't the same consistency, but there's a beauty in that. Mm-hmm. And we're finding that, you know, even working on it internally, there's a real beauty in the inconsistency and sort of the natural aspect of natural dyes. So again, it sort of goes back to what we just talked about, is, you know, if that becomes something a car manufacturer wants, that will be an education for the customer. So if you want, you know, a coffee, you know, sort of dye stuff, which can be done, there isn't going to be a consistency, but isn't there a beauty in all of that? So you start going down that path. Conversely, you know, color for us is something, as I mentioned, we're very well known for, and we like to see bits of color used in places, and I think there's a way to do that. So in other industries, you know, for instance, healthcare, they might just take, you know, sort of their trim, and on the trim they might put a red or a green, something like that, just as something that defines the shape of the either the chair or you know, the piece that they're doing. And I think there's something really beautiful about that kind of use of color versus, you know, thinking about an entire car interior being yellow. So I think there are wonderful ways to use colors as accents and to talk about color in terms of sustainability. And we're really starting to look at all of those different avenues when we develop color.
Nicola, I think Jennifer makes an interesting point there about this idea of a patina growing up, or a kind of almost like we all love the sort of our favorite armchair. I've got an armchair at home that's kind of, I can't believe it's still standing up, but I love the fact that it looks so worn and kind of, you know, loved and used. I mean, is that necessarily what people want in a car interior, though? Do they want to look a little bit like it's had a bit of a life, or are we, because of the nature of car ownership, we have to give them, but you know, if we're on a leasing scheme, or we have to give them back, they need to be as pristine as possible, so we don't lose too much of our initial investment. I mean, where did Lucid sit with that?
I think there's unfortunately no one answer to that question again. Sorry, James, because it does really depend on the customer more so than the brand. I think we have a responsibility to educate our customers on why a material might have patina, so that they understand that it's got a natural aesthetic to it. It hasn't been faked or anything like that. It is just how the material has adapted over time. And that emphasizes the level of sustainability, the less coatings, the less processing. So if we can bring them on that journey we hope that they will understand why materials look a certain way after a certain time. But you're right, we do have almost this legacy that the cars need to look as perfect as day one. And some customers will still expect that because it is a high ticket priced item. So we have to find this equal balance where the materials go through testing, they withstand a numerous amount of trials during the day, and will retain some sort of newness. But we have to, if we want to move into the world of sustainability and continue to offer authentic materials, like I say, educate the customers, educate people within the business as well as to why materials may not always look perfect. There's a lovely beauty in the perfect imperfect that is out there.
I like the idea of beauty being imperfect. I think it speaks to all of us generally.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot here, is imperfection in those kinds of, to start to embrace that. We're seeing that in a lot of other markets, where there's that embrace of, what imperfection, the beauty that imperfection can bring. We're seeing it a lot in fashion.
Yes.
So I think it's just, it's a good conversation to start to have.
And probably long overdue, I'd say, Jennifer. One of the things that I've, again, so I keep mentioning the fact that I've been to Milan. I have been there before. I'm not just bowled over by the fact that I've been there the first time ever, but I did get a chance to go and drive the Citroen Olli, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, the concept car that that Citroen under Pierre Leclerc have come up with. And what I noticed about that car was that it was really an architectural reduction. There were sort of materials and finish, but they were all left pretty raw. It almost reminded me a little bit about a car that perhaps would have been designed by an engineer who wouldn't worry too much about beautifying anything within the interior, just left all the structure exposed. And I suppose it speaks to this idea of lightweighting and the importance of B surfaces, because we do have, we have these huge batteries. Range is an issue. MC, please sort of give us your opinion on that. This idea of exposed structures, B surfaces, and how they may contribute to the sustainability, the lightweighting, the range of automobile.
I think it's where CMF can have a very significant impact to help, because as you explained, batteries are quite heavy. So the overall challenge is to make the car lighter, and this can be helped through the choice of materials. And to allow this, you have to accept to use different way to manufacture parts to allow parts to be lightweight. The choice of materials needs also to be lighter. PU is quite lighter compared to other materials. So that I think is there is different ways to do that, and we have to embrace different way and also combine the A and B surfaces to expose the surface and embrace the beauty of it. That's, I guess, like Nicola said before, it's a journey to explain to the customer the new aesthetic that, and I think it brings a creative range of option. I think, we've been stuck for many years to this wrapping condition, but I think this kind of new processes allow us to be more creative and expose a part that no one will notice before, and there is the beauty in it. And I think that, again, it's depending of the brands, there is way to expose it and find their solution. But lightweight is a big challenge, and I think CMF can really help with that. And it's reduce the complexity, the numbers of materials. There is multiple ways to kind of reduce the weight of the car.
Does that change the relationship you have with engineering as in the CMF? You have a much tighter relationship with engineering, or is that?
Yeah. I think.
Welcome.
I think for me, I feel like without engineering supplier, we are nothing. We need everyone. We need a team to create and come up with the best solutions. So. Talking to engineering, they come up with solution. Maybe at the beginning they might be, I was comfortable with my situation, so why would I change? So at the beginning you might have that, difficult approach. But I think everyone now is moving, and I realize even in Lotus, some engineers are passionate about it, and they really love to discuss about this and say, yeah, let me think, I will get back to you in 2 days. I'm sure there is a way we can resolve this. And it makes my job super interesting because, you know, it's more technical and it opens new doors that I never saw before. And it's quite interesting to get everyone on board. And even talking to suppliers, they have the knowledge of their products, so they know what to do with them and how they can push it. So I think it's all about collaboration, explaining the idea. It starts with a brief that we create and try to put everyone on a table to get somewhere. I'm not saying you get the answer right at the beginning, but it's a long process, but it's very interesting.
At least you're having the conversation, I suppose. Nicola, does this mirror your experience with the Lucid's engineering team, or do you build a sort of wall between you and them and try not to peek over it too often?
No, I think we work hand in hand with our engineers. I have some funny stories that I could go on into, but we do a lot of really collaborative workshops. We do sprints to kind of quickly assess materials, engineering, and as MC said, cost and complexity, because that is just super important. But the engineers help us develop our ideas, and then we involve the tiers and the suppliers. And that is how you get innovation. You can't innovate by being in a silo, but being on your own. You have to open up the doors to everybody else. And yeah, it can take some time, and some of the ideas that maybe come back to us are bonkers, but from bonkers you create magic. So it's really collaborative. It's lovely.
I do like bonkers as a starting point for any. Jennifer, do you want to sort of come in on the maybe not necessarily the engineering debate, but this idea of secondary finishes and from your perspective at Ultrafabrics?
Well, I will just touch on the engineering, because we obviously have an engineering arm here at Ultrafabrics. And what's been really interesting is that we do the same thing. I think the whole concept of silos is very old school. I'm such not a believer in, I think cross-functional conversations just lead everyone forward. They lead companies forward. It's the only way to really push the boundaries is by getting that cross-functional aspect actually within all the different departments, because then you really are getting, you know, input from so many different people who are all looking at the same thing. So I feel very, very strongly about even how we in Ultrafabrics in product development work with our engineers. It's one of the most necessary and strongest collaborations we have to get product sort of from A to B to C. I think the whole idea too with the raw material suppliers starting to engage with the CMF teams and then with your engineers earlier, I think is a really good idea. Obviously, we know a lot of stuff that we're working on won't work. You know, we can't promise everything, but I think there's something about this whole, this idea of having a goal, and then what are the roles that everybody plays in that goal, and how can we get there a little bit faster, a little bit more streamlined. It can be messy at first. We know those conversations can be very messy. You know, there's a lot of no, that can't happen, but then you press forward. I think it's a really important movement that we're seeing again across a lot of different markets.
It's interesting, yeah, the idea of it being a movement. Nicola, this idea of engaging with raw material suppliers earlier, this is something I hear actually from design directors, that they want to know more about what suppliers are working on, and in some ways it would be better if some of it would be a bit more, I'm not saying open source, but more shared knowledge out there in the public domain. But of course you have this push and pull where it is, but the business is, you know, you've got to make money, so why on earth would you put your IP out there for all to sort of get their hands on? But I'd love you to sort of speak a little bit to that point that Jennifer's making about this idea of early intervention, collaboration with material suppliers.
Yeah, I think it's a really good route forward, because if you collaborate early, you can, as Jennifer said, you hear the no, that can't work, or no, we can't do that, and you work through it early enough to make it work at the end of the day. And in terms of suppliers, you're right, it is a business, so they might only show you a small portion of what they actually want to create, but that's where the OEMs and the designers have a responsibility to really draw out from those initial seeds what you want to grow. And even to your point about seniors, directors, etc., being really interested, it helps us enormously, because some suppliers may not want to engage with smaller companies like Lucid, for example, because they're not sure if the business is going to go ahead. They know they're competing against a lot of other people. But when you get the support of the directors and have a strong company direction, we can really pull tiers and suppliers to show us the way of the future and get the best out of them.
That's an interesting point you mentioned about, you know, scale and size there for someone like, you know, Lucid, or obviously newcomers to the market. Lotus, more established, but still work in quite small runs of cars. MC, could I ask you a little bit about this this idea of a less of a strong focus on mass production and more efficient sort of innovative low production series, which may involve technology like 3D printing and soft tools?
Well, I think, you know, to move forward to sustainability, like we discussed before, you need to use different processes, and those processes will allow us more creativity and flexibility. And 3D printing is quite interesting new technology that is already being used by fashion. You know, there is loads of shoes, and I think adapting that technology to the automotive industry is quite interesting. And I think I don't think no one yet has the answer, but for companies that have low volume, I think that is a solution that is quite relevant, because no tooling, you don't have no waste. It allows you a lot more flexibility. If in 6 months you want to refresh it, you can do it. So it's infinite option, and low volume that allow us to use this type of technology is quite interesting and open new doors to CMF, where potentially before we were forced to sell 50,000 units. So you have kind of you need big tools to support that volume. But with small company like startups, you know, is kind of open the door to do that. It's quite interesting. I found it like for us quite refreshing to use this type of technology and open new kind of ideas.
And just thank you, MC. Just to say, please drop your questions in the chat. I can see they're starting to build up. So if you've got questions, don't be shy, throw them in, and I will do my best to put them to the panel. You raised an interesting point there, MC, which is I'd like to go into a little bit about ideas of luxury and how sort of options feed into this idea of luxury. Nicola, could you speak a little bit about that? Because luxury is now in a sort of not a state of flux so much as it's being redefined in some quarters as being a little bit away from historically where it had been, where we all know the signifiers were obviously leather and the like. So Nicola, maybe you could jump in there.
I think it's actually really important to now define what is luxury to people. And it is more than just the materials. It is about the experience as well. And it can be for some people the horsepower, the battery size, that to them might be luxury. And so for Lucid, we have to really define some key statements, some key points that will be luxury as we move forward. But to go back to material, for us, luxury is really about having really high quality material. It might not be about having the most expensive thing or lots of chrome or anything like that. It is now more about really high quality, authenticity, making sure that if a customer purchases the vehicle, they can really experience the stories that we were trying to get across through the interior colorways, through the haptics, through the textures, and bringing newness into the vehicle too. So on Air, we have our alpaca wool. And going back to a point MC said earlier, that has its limitations because it has a natural color. So it's balancing luxury with sustainability and bringing those two together and making that the new luxury, really.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to jump into the questions, I think, because a few of them are starting to build up. And actually, on the subject of authenticity, the first question is regarding sort of traditional products, and it is leather. Does leather still have a place of interest for customers? I can, you know, you can all go in on this. MC, I'll start with you, and I'll move around my little square.
So yeah, again, I think everyone has their own opinion on this. Personally, I think yes, there is a space, but again, you have to decide the reason why you're using it, and also the supplier. We talk about, you know, the honesty of the supplier, how they process their products. So I think for me, it's about who you work with, and but the leather itself, if the process of the tanning is sustainable, I don't have any issue. For me, again, it's about, you know, for what product, for what reasons. It can't be, you know, it's not one answer. And I think for me, going to the extreme reason to reject every materials, I think that's not right. I think we have to, there is a place for everything, but it's just, you need a story and you need a purpose. But leather also can't be only luxury. I think there is now the beauty of new materials that allow us to feel premium. So I think we should not reject this, and we should be open to new materials and not think leather equal luxury. Other materials can equal luxury too. So I think for me, it's more about being open to other materials than just say leather equal luxury.
And Jennifer, this is maybe a slightly awkward question for you. Leather's equal. No, but feel free to sort of, you know, expand.
No, I think exactly, like to MC's point, you know, there are rooms for all materials, and really the whole point of polyurethanes or other is choice. And I think brands are have to make the decisions of those choices. So we provide, obviously, as a polyurethane, a high performance, durable product that has beautiful haptics. That is the luxury aspect that we provide in our materials. So, you know, there's the pleasing textures. We can do so many different things with our textures and our color. So all of that creates, and I'll just sort of, I love the idea of authenticity being part of luxury, because I believe that fully. I think that's a comment that we often make when we're starting our process in terms of development. What is authentic about either this texture or this grain, and why is it so? But I also think luxury is so much about the tactile aspect, the sensory aspect that people you know, feel when they go into a space, into a car, into their home. You know, what is it about that space and that tactile approach is being made that makes them feel like it's a luxury interior? And I think a lot of that is it's thermal comfort, it's color. So yes, I obviously I think there is room. You know, people outside my office are like, "What are you saying?" No, but you know, there's room. But I have to say, you know, performance technical products, PUs, are in higher demand now because people are realizing that it is a luxury product, and it has sustainability attributes that become part of their story. So I think that's why we're seeing a much higher demand for them.
Thanks, Jennifer. And expertly negotiated, I might add. Nicola, where's your position on the sort of the leather question?
I think leather is still important for automotive, and similar to how MC said, it is understanding about where the leather comes from, the processes involved in the leather, because I think we also have to remind our customers that leather is a byproduct. It isn't, we don't kill cows or bulls in order to get the leather. It is a byproduct, and if you didn't use it, it would go into landfill, it might be incinerated, and that's not great for the environment. So leather has its own qualities, leather has its own haptics and textures, and it has a beauty to it. And I don't think we'll ever see it completely disappear, but going back to Jennifer's point, different materials like PU have different qualities. If you were to weigh those two materials, leather would be more heavier at the moment than the ultrafabric materials. So it depends what sustainability attributes you're going for, or generally what attributes you're looking for to implement into the vehicle that you think are important to the customer. Sometimes it's leather and sometimes it's not. And there's no need to kind of pinpoint is one better than the other. They all have really good qualities.
Are you telling me there's more than one answer to this question, Nicola?
I am, yeah.
That's the theme for the day. This is a very interesting question that's come in, and I think it's worth putting to all of you guys. What are the key criteria you choose to define that this material or that material is sustainable? Nicola, I'll stay with you, and then we'll move around the board, Monopoly style.
It's really interesting actually, because at Lucid, obviously being a new company, we're now trying to establish what are the Lucid values in terms of sustainability. We have our ESG team working hard on that, and we're trying to future plan. So it's not just things like weight, which are important to EV, but it's also things about water consumption, the manufacturing methods, provenance, all of this long list of what we call sustainability attributes. It doesn't necessarily mean that a recycled material has a better property or higher sustainability than a virgin plastic, for example, recycled plastic versus virgin plastic. You have to dig deeper. You have to understand what are the processes behind that. And I think we do really have to address everything. We have to be really scrutinize every single detail right down to the bottom, to make sure that we don't greenwash, which is something that has happened in the past. And going back to our earlier conversation about engaging engineering and engaging the tiers, we have to all come together to make sure that what we put out there, what our values are, have been written together, and that we all understand those are our goals, and that's what we have to reach. And Lucid are really trying to build that into our company across the board.
Thank you, Nicola. Jennifer?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, sustainability is a very large word that is, I think, used as a, sort of an umbrella that encapsulates so many different things. And what it means to certain markets and certain customers, it could be totally different. To your point, it could be water consumption, it could be circularity, right? It could be carbon footprint, where you're shipping your products from. It could be a bio-based product. So there's so many tenets under that concept. What we're trying to do here is we've set goals, sustainability goals across sort of all of those different attributes, so it's not just our products, it's our processing, it's, where we're shipping our goods from, and our raw materials. Where do we get our raw materials? Are they locally sourced? There's a new term called hyper locality, which is, everything has to be done within a certain range. There's a lot of different conversations about this. I think really strongly that, we're working on it from a product standpoint, as well as sort of our carbon footprint and all these other tenets, and really working with third-party companies who can come in and really sort of rate. And I think there's something really, we feel very strongly about that, so that it's not us telling our own story, but it's, outside observers coming in and really analyzing and giving us our different options of how to achieve our goals in a certain time frame, so that we can actually report out on that. And I think that's really important going forward, is that you have that sort of third party
almost adjudication, isn't it? Yeah.
Certifications, and also just, ways in which we can shift. That might not be something internally that we ever thought about, that we're really starting to look at. So that's a big movement within Ultrafabrics right now, just because we want to be able to speak to the authenticity of our goals, and have we achieved those those goalposts, and what more do we need to do?
MC?
Well, it's pretty much what Nicola and Jennifer said. I think that what I can add, sorry, is I think, like, going back to the beginning, there is not one answer, and I think and it should not be, because if you look at the recycled yarn, it's been asked by everyone, and there is now enough resources for everyone. So I think we should not have the same, pick the same materials. I think it should be the right answer for the brand itself. Again, going back to Nicola's comment, we need to move away from this green rushing story that has been used for many years, where we expect CMF to come up with a pretty story. But at the end of the day, if you look more deeper, maybe the air surface is sustainable, but because it's been glue mounted, you can't do anything with that. So the air surface might be good, but at the end of the life, you can't do much more than what you had before. So I think for me is where every party needs to work together to improve the way we build cars. And I think it's not only us, it's just beyond, B surface, manufacturing, supplier. So everyone needs to come on board. And from the beginning, we designed the car, we need to agree, okay, we have that part. What is the smart way to achieve that part in the most sustainable way? So I think that's where we need to challenge every element. And that's the only way we can achieve it. And again, everyone has a different way. Some brand could say durability, your car will survive 200 years. That's the story. Yeah. So you might have a different approach. The materials you're going to use are very different. Some might say, no, in 5 years, we can reuse your part, put it in a recycle process and put it back. So there is no one answer, and it's good. But it's very difficult for everyone, to be honest. For me personally, sometimes I get lost because there is so many variations and so different answers, different numbers, and sometimes you're like, oh my God. But it's interesting. It's an interesting time, to be honest. When I started 15 years ago, I remember when I talk about sustainability, everyone looked at me like, what? It will never go to automotive, no way. And today I'm like, yes. Happen. So it's quite, it's quite good to see the journey from that.
Yes, the terms of the parameters have shifted enormously, I think. Here's an interesting, I'm sticking with you actually, MC, because I think it pertains to what you're doing or Charles were doing at Lotus. And there's a question that's come in. CMF has been tasked with adding drama to fill a gap that used to be occupied by the engine, the performance, sound. Can you expand on how the future of CMS will fill this void? Is that something I'm sure you're looking at Lotus, MC?
Well, I think for Lotus, driver experience is at the heart of the brand, so it's super important. And moving to a lifestyle product for Lotus, that was the question, how we kind of still have that adrenaline feeling, without being a sports car. And I think where CMF can help is, is the tactility, the user experience, the way we interact with the car, the weight of the car itself. So there is different way we can achieve that, and it comes with, the way we interact with screen, the way we interact with steering wheels. This kind of element can bring this sensation without going, with, a V8 or V12 car. Yeah.
Thank you. And so there's an absolute ton of questions here, and I'm afraid we're probably not going to get to all of them because we're fast approaching the end of the session. But there are a lot of you still online, so we'll keep going. Let me just pick one, not at random. There's going to be a method to my madness, or is there? I'm not sure. Smart surfaces. That's where I was going to go. Smart surfaces. So Jennifer and Nicola, I'll start with you, Nicola. So hidden functionality, smart services, are they genuinely useful, or will they suffer a similar fate to the let's shove everything in a touchscreen trend that seems to be leading?
Very interesting point. And I think when we look at vehicles maybe 5-10 years ago, especially concept cars and things that were going on, there was almost this gimmicky approach of smart materials where you'd put every single button possible behind a wood veneer that wasn't actually wood.
Right.
And then it would be lit up in like bright green and bright blue. So it goes back to my point earlier of smart materials, add them to the vehicle if it adds value to the customer, if it adds value to the vehicle and the story and your journey that you're trying to make. I think from a Lucid side, if we just talk about the screens are incredibly important to Lucid. And we've managed to balance this interaction between the physical and the digital so that it's so seamless that it would be odd in the vehicle if the screen wasn't there. We've figured out the positioning, we've figured out the interaction, so the buttons are in exactly the right, perfect place. And the UX UI team are doing consistent studies to make sure that we don't need to really put these smart materials that people are familiar with the buttons behind the fake wood, because there is a beauty in the screens as well and how you use them, how you interact with them. And they don't feel like a spaceship. They don't feel like you can disassociate from it or that it's overwhelming technology. It really becomes part of that space, energy, and time story that Lucid are really strongly telling.
And Jennifer, would you, the smart surface conundrum debate, all in wrestling match, would you like to weigh in on this?
Yeah, well, yes, because I think one of the things we, as I've mentioned, we're always, our product development team is doing just as much sort of R&D as we are like working on our current materials, and a lot of that is about smart fabrics, right? Smart fabrics are being used in healthcare in a huge way, to monitor. You can sit in a chair, it can monitor your heart rate, it can monitor, your blood pressure, all of that. So I think there are ways in which smart textiles can be used that aren't gimmicky. And it's really about, what is the value add? And is that value add needed? Not every OEM will embrace that, but some will. And again, as a materiality raw, source, we have to be able to look into all of that and have these different options. So I think smart surfaces and smart textiles have a place, absolutely. How those are used in either larger or smaller ways, we always think of it as sort of less is more. I'm a firm believer in that quality of less is more. Start sort of, throwing screens and wood surfaces and touchpads all over. Suddenly, I do think you lose the idea of luxury, and it becomes just this, you're in a machine. And I think luxury is about the whole tactile aspect. So I do believe that less is more applies to smart textiles and smart surfaces.
Gosh, actually, there are so many questions in coming in. Thank you, Jennifer. There are so many questions coming in. I'm apologising in advance for not managing to get to all of them. Trends within the next 2 to 3 years, which is generally a sort of a lead time for a car MC. There's a question about that. How do you imagine the trends customers would like to have in 2 to 3 years? I suppose all will be revealed shortly with new range coming out from Lotus. But yeah, maybe do some short-term speculation for us.
Well, I think automotive is a very different industry than any other industry. So trend is slightly different for us, and I think the way we approach things is more about timeless and how long they will last. And also for me, it's not about just following the trend because this month is purple and everyone's jumping on purple. I think that's not the way it works for us. So I think for me, the way we look at trend is more about more on the technical side. I think we mentioned about smart surfaces. I think for us, it's more about be aware of this, how we can incorporate them. And, I think a big trend is about mono-materiality. I think is also understanding how we can reduce the amount of materials inside of the car. So for me, that's a big topic I'm sure a lot of OEM are working on. Yeah, I think there is loads of them, but I think we are looking more toward technology more than fashions, or I think it's always super interesting. We always digest them and use bits of them, but it's not that literal, to be honest. So it's difficult to say in the 2-3 years trend. It's so short for the automotive industry, to be honest. It's like tomorrow. So I think it's more like a continuity. It's more about building and moving toward more sustainable approach and more seamless design, I guess.
Thanks, MC. Look, we're on the hour now, so I think we can wrap up. There's just one more question I want to throw out there to each of you, and that is, what is the one thing that we are not talking about in CMF that we really need to be? We may be talking about it already, but Nicola, it's my slightly curveball question at the end.
Thanks. I think we don't talk enough. Well, we've spoken enough about it. It's been an hour about sustainability. It's still not spoken about enough. And I think what I really mean is the importance of it. I mean, we all see the news. We all see environment champions like Greta Thunberg. Like, the younger generations know what is happening in the world, and we can't ignore this. We have to really emphasize how important sustainability is, whether that's materials, whether that's processes, whether that's looking at reduction in complexity and cost, and everybody has a role to play. CMF will be key drivers in that. So within automotive, CMF needs to be given a much bigger platform to make sure that we're heard and make sure that sustainability really becomes the forefront of people's choices, people's opinions. Everything should be put forward like that.
Thanks, Nicola. Jennifer, same question.
You know, when you asked it, I was going to say the same answer, so she got to it first. Yeah, so I have to agree, because, you know, the younger generation, this is, you know, they're looking at us and saying, you know, what are you're not doing enough. You know, that's a big, you know, takeaway. You're not doing enough. You need to do more. And I agree with that. And I think, you know, we have to be able to look at it under the microscope of sustainability, but not giving up. It's not giving up luxury. It's not giving up comfort or haptics or performance. It's embedding it in everything that we do. So it's embedding it in our thought process as we design on any level. It's embedding it in the conversations we have with our engineers and the CMF teams. We have to make that a tenet that is forefront of all conversations as we produce, you know, new products.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jennifer. MC, if you could give a completely different answer and disagree.
If I say the same, is it good? Is enough? For me, one thing to add exactly, you know, the same comments as Nicola and Jennifer. For me, is maybe reverse the design process, design around materials. I think that's something that I think is getting there, but I think it's not enough. I think, you know, we need to change the process we are doing cars, and it should start differently. And of course, it might not please everyone because the design will change and it might not be what we expect, but that's the only way we can achieve true sustainability.
Wonderful, lovely answer to finish on. Okay, that's it. I think we've overrun slightly. I think it was worth it. I apologize to anyone I didn't get to put their question to, but we can try and sort of compile them and get them to the panelists if they agree to continue maybe the session, maybe perhaps in an email thread. But anyway, that's it for today. Thanks everyone who tuned in, everyone who threw a question into the mix. Lovely to have you, and thanks to our panelists, Nicola, MC, I quite like that, MC, it's called, and Jennifer, thanks. And we will catch you at the next live stream. The only thing that remains for me to do is a couple of shameless plugs. We'll be back at the IAA Munich for a live conference that we're hosting with the you'll see the slide on screen now, about the future of mobility. I urge you to attend. It will be me again, I'm afraid, but maybe in smaller doses. We've also got the People Awards coming at the end of the year. Actually, I could say this to our panelists: if you think you can win the CMF Team Award, I urge you to get your submission in. Submission is open, and I think, is that it? Have I got to plug anything else? I don't think I do. Oh yes, CDN in review. If you're not sick of the sound of my voice, we've got a new show that we're doing every quarter. Me and my trusty assistant Freddie Holmes, where we do CDN in review, where we look at what happened in the last 3 months in car design and what is coming up. But for now, thanks again to our panelists, and we'll see you at the next live stream.
Thank you.
Thank you.